Thing four, we're talking banks, bank earnings actually. And thing number four, Gary, we've got bank earnings are up big.
Yeah, so Rob, the major banks are big commercial banks in the US. They all tend to report in the same week. That was last week, and boy, did they all have great quarters. JP Morgan with record annual profits, a 50% increase in earnings, with almost a 50% increase in investment banking fees. Goldman Sachs, 118% increase in earnings per share. Morgan Stanley, investment banking revenue trading division, up almost 50%. Wells Fargo, Citi, everyone had an unbelievable quarter. Those stocks, which had sort of been languishing a bit, all took off. The laggards, if you want to call it that, the worst among them were up, from about 10% during the week. Others were up more than that. The biggest gainer over the last month was Citi, but the other big banks were not far behind. It was a great quarter for the big money center banks.
Gary, last week we talked about issues of buy now, pay later. We talked bad earnings, credit, mortgage issues all across the board. Seemed like we were painting a very, very gloomy picture, but now we get these bank earnings, and all of a sudden everything is good. Can you explain that issue? If everything sucks, why did we get such good bank reporting and earnings here?
Rob, that's a great question, and that's the right question to be asking, right? Because last week we talked about higher credit card delinquencies, higher auto delinquencies, problems in the collateralized mortgage-backed securities market, record vacancies on commercial credit, and now just a week later we're talking about record bank earnings. What in the world's going on? So that's a great question. It's the right question to ask. And the answer here is what we've been talking about for 2 years. We've been talking about a bifurcated economy, which is just a fancy way of saying that we have an economy that is phenomenal for a small number of people as inflation blows up asset prices, and wealthy people and large corporations have been able to borrow in dollars, which are debased, meaning they pay their loans back in dollars that are worth less, while they buy hard assets as the central banks blow up asset levels. Whereas, normal people are not doing so well. And inflation for them, instead of being an opportunity to buy assets financed with debt that becomes worth less, it just becomes a problem when they try to put food on their table, pay their rent, pay their mortgage with higher mortgage rates, or put gas in the car. And so we've had this bifurcated economy, and that's what we're seeing. Last week, we talked about weaker consumer lending statistics. When we talk about the big banks, they're lending to hedge funds that are doing well. They're lending to large corporations that are doing well. Basically, if you're lending to the ultra wealthy or big companies, or doing mergers and acquisitions business, trading business with the markets at or near all-time highs, those are great businesses to be in. But the average consumer is struggling right now. And so I think that's what we're seeing. I think what we're looking at is a continuation of this theme that we've had for 2 years, which is a small part of the country, a small part of the economy has done well over the last 4 years, and a large part of the country is struggling. I'm hoping to see that change. We'll see what kind of policy changes we see out of the new Trump administration. There are going to be a lot of regulations, and we'll see what happens with consumer credit. The one thing where we do have some hope is the first Trump administration was really good on deregulation, and I think the last 4 years have been very rough on small businesses, and I'm hoping that the second Trump administration, that they'll have a deregulatory focus that will help small businesses and help people who are running small businesses operate their business more efficiently and with less interference from the government. If that's the case, then we'll start to see some help for some of the people who have been struggling recently. I'm not telling you I know what's going to happen in this situation. This is my hope for the part of America that isn't necessarily doing business with Citi and Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs.